This week on the TT Show, we take a close-up look at NVIDIA's game-changing AI technology. AMD's Fluid Motion Frames 2 is here. Activision's secret experiment on players. Logitech's new Forever mouse. A new AI wearable that can bully you. And Microsoft lowballing the number of Windows machines that went down from the CrowdStrike update. Let's get into it. Welcome back to the TT Show. My name is Jak Connor. I'm a hardware editor over at Tweaktown, and today I'm joined by my co-host,
Kosta Andriadis, gaming hardware editor at Tweaktown.
Hello, my friend.
How are you? I'm interested to hear about the AI that gets angry at you.
Oh, yes. Yes, as you guys would have heard in the intro, we have a pretty balanced show ahead of us today. We're taking a look at some of the new AI technology that's coming out from AMD and NVIDIA. Fluid Motion Frames is AI as well?
No, but I think they used AI to improve it. But yeah, that's that's gaming tech. So like NVIDIA has a new AI technology. They released a paper, which we'll go into a bit later on, that's very, very technical. I asked my brother's opinion, who works in the game development, working on like 3D graphics and stuff, and he says he's going to ask his like rendering experts, but like it looks like the sort of tool that developers will basically go, oh man, that's going to save us so much time and so much complex. It's going to remove a lot of the complexity out of doing all this sort of hardcore, games that take thousands of people to make it look like that. GTA 6 requires 10,000 people just so that trailer can look as amazing as it did. You know what I mean? So they've got this new tech that could revolutionize a lot of that stuff, which we'll get into.
We'll get into that a bit later on. Before that, though, we have a few updates on stories that we were talking about last week. If you tuned into last week's episode, we did a deep dive on the recent CrowdStrike outage. Yep. We pretty much from the start to finish of the update for the Falcon sensor rolling out, what happened at the driver level, the memory loss, which led to the estimated 8.5 million Windows machines going down. Critical infrastructure around the globe collapsed. We saw airlines. Delta was completely destroyed unless you were running, what was that airline that we were talking about that was running Windows
Southwest
92 that was safe?
Windows 3.1. Yeah. Southwest Airlines. Yeah. Yeah, it was operating system from 1992 or 93 or whatever it was. Yeah.
Yeah. So we got an update on that. As you can probably imagine, more and more details about the CrowdStrike outage are coming out. And if you're going to pay attention to anything, it's what Microsoft is saying. And this is just a little update on the number of affected PCs. So at first, it might seem like, stuff was down for like 18 hours or so, point of sale systems, airlines.
But the thing is that
stacks up pretty quickly per hour in terms of revenue loss. And I just wanted to mention before we jump into the recent statement from Microsoft is the first revenue estimates of the outage approximated a $5.4 billion loss for companies in the Fortune 500.
Which is insane. But I think the context is that the type of error it was required like a full hands-on, like we discussed last week, was you have to actually get the Windows PC manually on site to go into recovery mode, and then you have to go into safe mode, and then you have to delete these 3 files. So it's like for those of us that know how to use a computer that have had to, a Windows issue, which is basically everyone, being able to do a very basic recovery or reset or whatever the case is annoying, but it's not difficult. But when you're looking at a million PCs that you have to do this for, that requires hands-on people, is very, very different to a critical patch that's sent over the net that fixes these PCs that, you know, like remote access or whatever, and it's like, okay, that's like very different, you know, like in terms of like how much money it's going to cost just to repair it versus how much money is lost because you're waiting on somebody to actually go out to physically fix the PC. That's what made the CrowdStrike issue, I think. Obviously, the fact that it just took out all these systems, but B, that it required just boots on the ground, so to speak.
Yeah, it required physical intervention, which is the, I suppose, the cherry on top of the outage itself. Yeah, maybe we should just touch on why it required physical intervention. The kernel, the update updated a piece of software that operates at the kernel mode, and the update caused the kernel mode to detect faulty pieces, a faulty bit of code, and because
just
it
like
was
a memory
changed,
address register, like at the
it
low
was
level,
looking for memory where there wasn't any, and because it was updated in the kernel mode, as soon as a fault in the kernel is detected, the Windows will prevent further damage by blue screening. And because it was in the kernel, you would boot again, the kernel would start up, and the update is there, detect the faulty bit of code, blue screen. Endless. And now we're in what is called an infinite blue screen of death boot loop until you boot the machine in safe mode or recovery, and you can boot up to 15 times to trigger recovery or get into safe mode some other way, and then once you're in there, because you're in safe mode, you didn't actually boot up the Windows boots a very limited amount of kernel drivers in safe
just
mode,
very basic,
so just
display driver,
just the
basic
bare bones
input driver, basic so like your PC runs in, like back in the day, safe mode used to put you in like a Nintendo 64 resolution, but like now it's updated because modern displays. But like it's a very, very basic display driver, very, very basic input. And then from there you can access File Explorer, head to the CrowdStrike directory, and delete the offending files in there that are causing these blue screens. But now we get to the update on Microsoft. So in a recent blog post, David Weston, Vice President of Enterprise and OS Security at Microsoft, explained the company measured the impact of the incident through crash reports, and not every Windows customer has opted into crash reports. So that 8.5 million figure that we got was based on crash reports, not on the total affected Windows machines. However, in the initial statement on Microsoft, like this was as the crisis was unfolding, Microsoft said that it affected less than 1% of total Windows machines. Now, there is an estimated 1.5 billion Windows machines around the globe, and 1% would make that 15 million. Which would be double the amount of what they initially said it was, or estimated to be. But it's just an interesting fact, and what I want to highlight in this story is the corporate speak. In the blog always
post,
like especially when it's costing companies billions of dollars.
Yeah, no, it's always fun to try and sift through this
labyrinth almost.
Yeah, so we'll give it a shot here. This is from the blog post from David Weston. It's worth noting the number of devices which generated crash reports is a subset of the number of impacted devices previously shared by Microsoft in our blog post. Because crash reports are sampled and collected only from customers who choose to upload their crashes to Microsoft. Customers who choose to enable crash dump sharing help both driver vendors and Microsoft to identify and remediate quality issues and crashes.
Yeah, it's changing the subject.
Yes. He said at the start, what is the most important part of this statement is it's worth noting the number of devices which generated crash reports is a subset of the number of impacted devices previously shared by Microsoft in our blog post, which was that 8.5 million figure.
It's like when your game crashes, or when you think it's like there's always like options or whatever, like send report to the developer, send the bug thing around.
I always try and do that.
Yeah, I always do it. Like, but then back in the day, I remember not doing it. A lot of, like, I don't do it for like certain things. It's like, well, you know, sometimes you're like, well, maybe you should release
figure it out.
Yeah,
figure it out.
Software should be
figure
good.
it out without me.
My question is, like, don't you think that CrowdStrike will be able to say we've got this number of customers?
Surely.
Like how many? Like, have they come out to say how many customers they have? And like, they should just say, like, why are we waiting on Microsoft to tell us? So obviously, I mean, my answer to that would be that Microsoft and CrowdStrike are obviously close partners. So Microsoft's not going to come out and say, hey, ask CrowdStrike, it's their fault. And then by that same token, CrowdStrike's not going to say, ask Windows, blah, 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 ask Microsoft.
I think CrowdStrike is the best people to ask here, because they should be able to see how many Windows machines the Falcon sensor software is installed on.
Yep.
And from there be able to determine how many went down right after the faulty update was pushed out to like the production line. I think this is corporate speak that is adding just ambiguity around how many systems are affected. I initially thought, and maybe it is because I am speaking to an IT, I should get his name up. He's very helpful in helping me understand what this is, the severity of it. It's Professor Ahmed Banafa. Been talking to him on Twitter about this, and he initially said, and I think I mentioned it in last week's episode, that 8.5 million seems low for how severe the impact of this was. Like, we saw airlines, we saw telecommunication services, we saw point of sale systems here in Australia. Like Coles supermarkets closing their doors here in Australia, emergency services, and 8.5 million machines. Like
when like your local supermarket in some random suburb in Australia is affected, then how many of those exist in the wider world? If you know what I mean?
Yeah. Do you think 8.5 million is low?
Yeah, I think it's a low ball. I think they're keeping the exact number off the table for now, because I think it's going to be a lot higher. And even if it is 15 million, that's a lot. But I think because of the potential, I mean, like the cost, like you said, the estimated costs and stuff like that, like I think there is potential for, we mentioned last, like lawsuits or whatever, and things like that, and terms of service and breach of contract. Like, so CrowdStrike is going to be very, very careful on what they say and how much, like, obviously apologize. I mean, that's why it took him probably so long to acknowledge and apologize or whatever, because as soon as you say, I'm sorry, we messed up, then you've taken ownership of the fault, and then you're liable for it, in terms of, especially like if you got like a high level business agreement, because all these agreements at that level are built on service level agreements or contracts that state, like, if there's an issue, it'll be resolved within 2 hours. If there's, like you pay, like a software, like a version of like an off the shelf security software is like $50 or $100 for us, but then like a business will spend $3,000, but that amount of money, like, guarantees that they're going to have like tech support, and if there is any issue, where like it's resolved within an hour or 2 hours, and that's how it works. And as soon as you're in breach of that, you're liable for like X amount of costs and
the
whatever.
stakes are a lot higher. I'm just trying to think here. Where to go with this story? Let's talk the estimated costs, because you were just bringing that up. I'm starting to do some reports on. There's a cloud monitoring and insurance company called Parametrics, and they have estimated the global loss of revenue is 15 billion. Airlines, 860 million. Go down here. Let's get. Hold on, wait. Yep. Okay, here we go. Manufacturing, tens of millions. Transportation, tens of millions. Finance, tens of millions. Retail, 500 million. IT, 500 million. Airlines, 860 million. Banking / healthcare, $3 billion. What do you think?
I mean, I don't know how they get these numbers, but like I'm sure the impact is massive. I'm sure it is. But yeah, like I don't know how that gets like resolved, like who's liable for it, or is just they take it on the chin.
Well, Delta is already looking to sue, and I've got a story in the back end right now that I'm planning on writing after we record this. Delta's CEO comes out and says we've lost $500 million from the. So I reckon that 860 million that was estimated by Parametrics of all airlines. Low ball again. Delta CEO came out, I think last night or today, and said we lost 500 million. They had to cancel like 6,000 flights or something like that. And they are looking to seek damages from CrowdStrike and Microsoft, which is an important distinction here. I've got a story. I can add it into the show notes, which you guys can find in the YouTube description below of all the stories that we're talking about in today's episode. Delta is seeking damages from Microsoft and CrowdStrike over $350 million Windows outage loss. That was only 2 days ago. Now, this morning, Delta's CEO comes out and says 500 million. All right, this number is going up and up and up. This CrowdStrike isn't even going to be able to pay for all this. What happened?
No, that's right. But I think there's too many. Like if it's ingrained in too many industries and things, it's like the cost of change is just going to be too much for it to like, you know what I mean? Like I don't think there's like a certain level like you know when there was a global financial crash, if we remember, like the Big Short movie and stuff like that, that term too big to fail became kind of like mainstream, where you know this company is basically, you know, if they cause this amount of damage, they can't fail, so they have to be bailed out by the government, whatever. Like, you know, if CrowdStrike is embedded in all these industries and and it goes, if it says, oh, we can't pay that fine when we're going out of business, then they can't. It's like, oh well, we can't let them go out of business because CrowdStrike software's on in all these industries, and if all these industries need to change, it's going to take X amount of time, and then they can't change. And you know what I mean? Like I think they could be too big to fail. Microsoft is too big to fail if their Windows is on so many devices that it can't disappear. Whatever, you know what I mean? They can't be taken to task and like cleaned out, so to speak, because of an issue.
Yeah, broken up.
Yeah, like it's just like I don't think. I think the damages will be within the realm of what these companies can afford.
I completely agree with that. So yeah, that is just a update on the total number of Windows machines. I'm guessing as the days progress, weeks progress, we're going to start to figure out more accurate figures for these types of things. It could even be the possibility of what you said earlier, Kosta. We're never going to really know like a hard figure, because as soon as there is a hard figure, maybe that comes with some kind of admission of guilt that they don't want to run the risk of if this, and it is seeming to go to courts. So
I think there'll be like deep dives and investigations, but like
for sure,
it's still so fresh that
it is
like it requires. Like there could be like an element of it, like a key element that we just still don't know yet. Like it'd be like, oh, like a revelation, like these sort of things happen. So like next week we could have like, guess what? You know what actually happened in this specific scenario? Like, you know, I don't think it's a closed book yet, and it's just
no, absolutely not. We should move on to our Intel update, but before we do that, let's take a quick break. All right, welcome back. We are going to jump straight into that Intel story. We have an update, and of course, if you have been paying attention to the news, Intel is currently on fire for their seemingly expanding list of affected CPUs that
but
you want to say
the flagship.
Would you say broken?
Well, it's at this point it's now like disaster mode. So their flagship 13th gen and 14th gen CPUs have been having instability issues for several months, crashing and things like that. And then after that, it was like, people investigating as well as Intel investigating, and it looks to be an issue relating to voltage, and those flagship CPUs draw heaps of power. So that was like seen as like one of the major issues. And that is definitely what could be the case, like elevated voltage issues. There was an additional manufacturing issue that's been rectified, but the elevated voltage issues, they've released a statement when we recorded last week, and Intel said we're going to release a BIOS or a microcode update in August, they're targeting mid-August. Obviously, they're probably working like crazy to validate and test and make sure that their changes are going to work and not going to crash systems, and because it's a very delicate thing when you've got so many different motherboards and CPUs and PC configurations. But like, I think one of the big topics last week that we discussed was like Intel needs to come out and formally talk about this. They need to like explain what's going on, like just beyond just saying, yeah, there's an issue, we're investigating it, and we're going to roll out an update. Like, people want to know what's going on, and what are they going to do to fix it. And so there was a interview with The Verge that Intel's a spokesperson, or one of their engineer spokespersons or technical people, Thomas Hannaford. And basically it was a situation where it was kind of like what we were talking about. The Verge was like, all right, these are all the questions people have. You need to answer them. And in a smart move, Intel's going to do that, right? You pick one outlet, or whatever the case is, and you do the big interview, and then that sets the baseline. But that interview obviously, then opened up or laid bare that this is a massive, massive issue. They basically said that there is no fix for affected CPUs. Any damage that's already taken place is permanent. So whatever this elevated voltage thing is doing, it's actually damaging the hardware. And so, this is the dot point summary. This is everything we learned from that interview with Intel, and this is what Intel has come out to confirm. So the first thing, there's no fix. The second thing, the damage comes from exposure to elevated voltages. However, the company is investigating alternate reasons for chips failing, so there could be more to the story. Some of the failed CPUs can be traced back to an oxidization manufacturing issue, but that was rectified last year. Intel is confident that the microcode and BIOS update coming in August will be a preventative measure for the problem, so that this is a case of if your CPU is working fine, this update is critical because it will ensure that whatever issues are happening isn't going to damage your CPU. Intel is not halting sales of affected CPUs, and there are also no current plans for a product recall. Intel confirms that the issue could affect any 13th or 14th gen CPU, which includes those that are rated at the lower 65 watt power rating. So they've confirmed that yes, that's possible, or that's happening. And affected customers or those with CPUs degraded beyond repair will be offered replacements, because there were reports of Intel refusing RMAs, or there were some cases where they were saying, no, you're not going to get it, whatever, sorry. So that's what they've come out and said. There's obviously that it's great that they came out and confirmed all of this, but obviously this paints a picture that this is way worse.
It's a mess.
That it's a mess, and now we've got like 100 more questions.
Well, the confirmation that the issue could affect any 13th and 14th gen CPU. That wasn't previously known.
No.
At the time, it was, we were just getting, well, I don't want to say just, but the vast majority of reports for these instability failures were on the 13900K, 14900K,
Yep.
specifically the K series CPUs as well. I'm guessing those.
KS,
I mean, I don't review CPUs, but are drawing more power than the other ones, or at least at the very least, tripping up this voltage problem.
I think
more often.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's what it is. But like, I think it's also could be just like a hardware issue now. That's basically saying that the way that these chips are designed doesn't matter the power level. That there is like an issue that this microcode will fix. But like I think, like based on what we're seeing in terms of like the reports of failures, it's that obviously the flagship CPUs that are drawing a lot more power, but they're also being pushed really hard, right? Because a lot of the issues are coming from like game developers or like visual effects studios. We've heard like, where they come out saying, oh, we're replacing all our servers or
performance users.
Yeah, so they're high performance users. So they're basically sitting there rendering or whatever that's happening, like, the CPU's cranked at 100% constantly. Whereas, even just normal enthusiasts, or like, let's say you're a PC gamer, like a high-end PC gamer, and you're gaming in 4K or ultra-wide, more often than not, your CPU is not running at 100%, your GPU is running at 100%. So it could be a case of, it's, like the odds of it, or like the number of cases will be less because the CPU is not being taxed as much, if you know what I mean. Like I think as you go down the line, there's going to be fewer and fewer affected CPUs.
Okay. I have a question for you. What do you think about the product recall or lack of?
Well, there is like an additional story that went live the other day that Intel is downsizing, that there's a potential that they're going to cut
10,000
jobs, and it's going to save them billions, and
maybe that's to pay for a recall that's about to happen,
and their stock prices drop. So like there's obviously an impact. Like this has already like affected their brand, right? So if they do a massive
100%,
if they do a worldwide product recall on all 13th and 14th gen CPUs, which they actually have the 70% market share in terms of desktop CPUs, boy, that I think that is like, it's a drastic measure, but it's also a measured one. It's like, well, they're faulty. Let's bring them back. Let's make sure they're all.
It's like it's time to face the music. If it is as bad as any, like Intel confirms that the issue could affect any 13th and 14th gen CPU, and the ones that are affected are permanently damaged. And the patch in the microcode and BIOS update that are coming in mid-August
it doesn't
fix
repair
those.
Yeah, no.
It doesn't repair them. It only prevents CPUs that aren't already degraded from failing in the same way.
And they could all, like, there could be CPUs that have already started the degradation process that, like it takes that reaching a certain level before it's noticeable or before there are crashes. So it's weird, but also as well, like because it's a chipset driver update or a BIOS update is going to fix the issue. It doesn't sound like it's manufacturing. So like a product recall is like, well, the issue is weirdly, with motherboards, but not specifically the motherboard makers. It's not like a Gigabyte issue or a ASUS issue. They load their motherboards with the chipset drivers that provided by Intel. But then they can obviously work within those parameters of voltages and overclocking capabilities and whatever access they give users. So like it's like a weird thing where, because of PCs are just messy to begin with, because they're so open and there's so many variables for like, and there's so many different options that you have for like motherboard, RAM, cooling, etc. But then when it comes to CPU, you've only really got Intel or AMD. Two options, but the fault here seems to be just with how they've developed these CPUs and how they work in a full system. So it's like almost like Like, what do you do? Like, do you product recall the CPU and then if you send a replacement, and then that motherboard hasn't been updated, then that one's going to fail again. So it's like, what did the product recall actually achieve? If you know what I mean, like nothing.
Yeah.
So that's it's so, like you said, like I think the best way to describe it is that it's just messy, and then it's going to get messier.
If they do a recall, that would what is their next generation coming out again? Is it Luna?
Yeah,
or is
Luna
that's
Lake.
the mobile? That's the mobile processors, right?
But I think there's desktop coming on in
This is
September,
Raptor.
October. This is Raptor Lake, yeah. The
Yeah,
14th gen is Raptor Lake, yeah.
Yep. So the next generation launch, do you think we're going to see I suppose it's a two-part question. Do you think we're going to see a flop of a launch because of all this brand damage, or maybe just a complete loss in faith in Intel if they don't roll out some kind of recall kind of thing, or a this microcode update, and the voltages that it's going to fix this excess voltage that the CPU is being commanded to draw. Is this going to affect performance? And should consumers, buyers of these CPUs, be compensated for, let's say, a 5% performance dip because of a corrected microcode?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's, I guess, like what if there is like a performance dip? What does that mean, like, in terms of like what you paid for, right? You paid for X, and now you're not getting that.
Because if they roll out their fix in mid-August this month, as we're recording this on the 1st, and then they launch their new generation, I think we said September, right?
Yeah, I think like it's on track for September, October. Like, yeah. Like they're going to have a new CPU launch. They have to, because Ryzen 9000 is literally around the corner.
Yeah. So if they do microcode update and the tests come out that they've actually gimped performance on all of these affected CPUs in order to fix the problem of crashing, I reckon their next generation that comes out is going to limp out the door. Unless they have mind-blowing performance and efficiency at a insane price.
I think CPUs have kind of like plateaued in terms of being game changers. Like Ryzen, the next gen Ryzen, by all accounts, is looking to be like an incremental or like a generational upgrade. Great, but like I think the big thing with that is that it's more efficient, and that's really impressive. Like they run cooler, and apparently they're that's AMD's is what the information that they've provided officially. So that's great. And like I don't like Intel, their node generations are like several steps behind AMD. So what they've been doing recently is like just putting more power through the 13th and 14th gen to be like unbeatable. It's like but the CPUs, to hit that performance level, you're drawing 320 watts. And now you're beating a 170 watt Ryzen CPU. It's like, well, congratulations. Like, to most people, that's all they care about, is that just to see that slightly
raw
higher, tower on the on the chart, and that's all that looks great. But with the next gen, like, it's weird because like Intel, like you have to understand like the side of Intel, that because they're such a legacy company, right? They have OEM deals that AMD just cannot penetrate, right? So OEM deals that are brokered with like Microsoft and like other hardware companies, Dell's and HP and Lenovo, right? Like these big companies, right? And then they sell just all these desktops to businesses and packages, and those OEM deals have been in place for decades. And so like if they're going to have a new generation of CPUs, they've already 100% they've spoken to all these companies that they have these OEM deals with to make sure that that's not affected going forward. But I think where you're spot on is like the question mark is like enthusiasts or the consumer people, the people that are buying the CPUs on Amazon or Newegg or wherever the case is, and putting together their PC or walking into a computer store and buying a CPU. I think it's going to be a case of, they're going to lose market share because of this at that sort of like off the shelf level. I don't see any other result really, especially like if AMD nail this Ryzen 9000 series launch without, some sort of like major fault. Let's just say
a similar problem,
what I mean?
of
like
some
something
kind.
comes out where like, oh no, the CPU is crashing.
Yeah. Well, we talked about last week that they aren't happy with the quality of the
there was some quality
first batch of 9,000 CPUs and are postponing the launch.
And that could have been something as simple as like a misprint. Like it was a screenshot of something where like the Ryzen
I hope so.
7 was the Ryzen 7 9700X said Ryzen 9 9700X instead of 7. So it was like a misprint on the lid of the CPU, which obviously makes sense because then it's like, all right, you do a recall for that. If there's a batch that just misprinted the CPUs, which is like, if that's what happened, then that's great because it means that there wasn't a 11th hour architectural issue with some, like basically what's happening
microcode.
With Intel. Basically what's happening with Intel. We have to rush out BIOS updates and recalls and whatever the case is. So this will be ongoing, I think.
Absolutely. It'll absolutely be ongoing. And all of the bad news for Raptor Lake here and Intel being on fire is just marketing for the AMD 9000 series.
Yep.
The more that Intel continues to fumble this problem, the more AMD CPUs are going to be out in the wild. I'm keen to see what the Steam hardware survey is going to look like after the launch. Yep. And or maybe like a couple of months after the launch of both of these new generation CPUs. I reckon we're going to start to see some big changes. Changes. I reckon all of this negative press is going to be a stain that Intel is going to have to rub out over multiple generations.
Yeah. Basically their next gen not only has to be performative now, it has to be flawless.
Yeah, it has to be.
It just has to be to be above, because that's the only way you can
regain consumer trust.
Yeah, like Samsung with their Galaxy phone issue that became just like a meme, or everybody on the street was but they're now a Galaxy phone it's you're not going to walk into a store and say, don't buy that, it's a Galaxy, they're bad. They made
they were exploding,
yes,
right?
They were exploding. Yeah, and you can't get worse than that. But they managed to ensure that every release after that has been pretty much spot on in terms of performance.
Yeah, non-exploding phones.
The way they
set it on the box. All right, let's jump over to
good news story.
What was that? Sorry.
A good news story,
yes.
So
NVIDIA's game-changing AI technology. Let's do that.
Yeah. So DLSS has been a game changer, right? When it first launched, NVIDIA was like, here, we're going to use AI to upscale. And you're like, what? What's this going to do? It's going to boost performance. How is this going to work? No, there's no way that's going to look as good. But now fast forward, all the updates, it's standard, right? If you're playing in 4K, you'll run DLSS because it actually looks better. If you use the quality mode, it looks better than native rendering in a lot of scenarios, and you get better performance. So there's always going to be and the next step for that is to get AI to inject it into beyond just, the final image, upscaling it or whatever the case is to use it for some sort of rendering for how textures appear, how how modeling works or environments or whatever the case is. Every company's looking into AI now. So as part of their SIGGRAPH 2024, which is all about AI and computing, and big event that just happened this week, or was it? Yeah, it was this week.
Isn't it a graphics convention?
Yeah, it's a graphics convention, but because NVIDIA is NVIDIA, it's now an AI and graphics convention.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
So they've introduced something. It's like basically a research paper, right? So this is a translation, and they've done a summary. So this is my interpretation of what this is. It's called NVIDIA Real-Time Neural Appearance Models. It's the clumsiest, convoluted name for what it is, but like this is a potential game changer based on what they're explaining it does and how it works. So it's basically, the best way to explain it is that, like, you've got generative AI and we know Llama, we know these models, right? So it's basically putting one of these AI models into like the game engine almost in a way. It's like so it actually runs in there in the rendering pipeline like an AI model that actually just runs as part of the game as well. Is the best way to kind of like set the tone for it. So you've seen Cyberpunk with the RT Overdrive mode. You've seen Portal RTX. You've seen these RTX Remix projects, which are full path tracing mods, or Alan Wake 2 with full path tracing, right? And it needs frame gen, and it needs a 4080 or a 4090 to realistically be playable at a higher resolution. And path tracing is the future of game visuals, but because a PS5 can't do it and a Xbox Series X can't do it, even a PS5 Pro won't have enough power to do path tracing, right? So realistically, this is 5 years down the track or 10 years down the track. Like, this is where games are going to look a decade from now, but there are titles that you can experience this now because NVIDIA is going all in on this sort of tech. But like, regardless of that, if you look at modern games, when they hit realistic visuals, right? Like, you look at metals on objects, you look at cloth, you look at in one of these examples like ceramics, or like you've seen in games where you're like, oh, look at that, like that texture, quote unquote, looks real. And the way that it is basically a material. So if you've played a game and it's compiles shaders, first time you load Call of Duty, it sits there compiling shaders and things like that. So basically the reason why it does is because to make objects look realistic in a game, it has multiple layers, right? So it has like the texture, it has like a layer of gloss, it has like a layer to replicate the scratches on it, a layer to ensure that it reflects light properly, a layer to do this, a layer to do that, a layer to do that. And each one of those requires like shader technology to render, which means that it just takes a lot of power to do it. So what they've come up with is a neural material rendering. So basically it means any sort of like object, like whether it's their examples is like a ceramic teapot, and they showed like a clay or a metal like vase. Like, and these are like realistic, where there's fingerprints on them, they're shiny, they're ceramic. They're materials that, like, if you see them, like, you go, that looks realistic. That looks like a metal vase with scratches and stuff like that. And that looks like a teapot. And so they can take references that are as big as 16K by 16K and recreate details like on like fingerprints, smudges, dust on objects. And using this AI model, it can recreate that at 12 up to 24, from 12 to up to 24 times faster than traditional compute shaders. So 24 times faster. What does that mean? NVIDIA basically says that, like, let's say you're making visual effects for movies, right? And it takes so much rendering to make things look real.
Yeah.
We can improve that by 24 times.
Wow.
If you're doing that in Unreal Engine, we can improve that by 24 times. And also path tracing. So like these games like Cyberpunk RT Overdrive mode, imagine like, but not only that, because you've got that, because it's so much faster, it actually can hit a higher level of detail. So it could be, games can look better and run faster because of this tech. And it could be, and it will be a game changer essentially. If it's, a lot of the comments from industry people has been, it's like, oh my, like, this is incredible. Those in the rendering business. So like went through all the YouTube comments. I looked online to see what people were saying, like on forums in this sort of industry. And they were all saying like, this is incredible if it works. But also as well, it also means for game developers. So like if you're not running a 4090 and you're not going to run the ray tracing mode, to actually them to like, the baked lighting, like, like they work out all the lighting and stuff like that. and it all looks good with they create their textures and all that sort of stuff, and then when you play the game it looks great, but it's like the fake lighting, or like how games work is they bake lighting, you know, it's a static time of day that doesn't change, so the light doesn't need to change, like so like it just looks really, really good when it's like static. You can make games look really good. So what this will do for that is that it'll mean that all these game developers don't have to run complex mathematical equations to work out all the different layers for rendering or creating like these, you know, all these different materials, like for like metals and ceramics and cloth and wood and brick and like, you know, all these materials that look realistic in games now takes a lot of effort. So like that's just going to be dramatically improved. So it's a win-win, because it's like doesn't mean that you're going to have to. It's only for RTX on games. It's not. It's going to be for all games.
It looks incredible. My question is, do you think this is going to be gatekept behind the next generation of graphics cards? Like, are we going to see like the 5000 series come out and it's this
DLSS4
level of rendering is only compatible with the new generation of NVIDIA GPUs? Because this would get me to upgrade. Look at that.
I think that it should be able to run on the Tensor cores in all 30 and 40 series GPUs. I would hope that that's what the plan is, because that automatically covers 70% of all gaming GPUs out there, or whatever the case is, right?
That would be good.
I don't want it to be exclusive to the 50 series, but like I wouldn't be surprised if it is, but because they've set that precedent with DLSS 3's frame generation.
That's what I was thinking.
But like maybe it's a 40 and 50 series, but whatever the case is, like we predicted that, like we've discussed it, that like when they announce the 50 series, they're going to announce DLSS 4. And I think that the one component or something that they're really, really working on is going beyond upscaling or going beyond frame generation, is to do kind of like what they did with the 3.5 ray reconstruction update, where it was like their own denoiser that somehow made ray trace reflections look noticeably better, or like ray tracing just looks crisper and more detailed on an NVIDIA GPU now because of that tech. Like I think they're going to do something like that, like something rendering that's going to be like, oh wow,
because that's the first thing I thought of
now
when
games look better. Like
when you were explaining this, I'm like, this sounds like to me like it's going to be the next piece of NVIDIA software to launch alongside a new generation of graphics cards.
It's exciting.
It's very exciting. It looks incredible. It almost looks too good. Like I reckon games, if they look this good, it's going to start getting into the realm of like the uncanny valley.
Well,
don't you reckon?
Yes, but I think like the good thing is that like it'll just make these objects. Yes, but like I don't think like all game developers going to try to make photoreal graphics. I don't think that's ever going to be. It's like stylized will always win out. Some sort of artistic art direction will always win out. But even the case is, but like even if you play like Elden Ring or something like that, right, which is pure fantasy, pure high fantasy, really. But then like if you got like you got ceramic objects, you got stone objects, you've got materials in there, but then they're all just rendered using this technology, and so they just look way more, even like way more like cartoony than. Or like it looks more like a CG film than it ever did before.
Yeah.
Like I think it translates to all things, because like that's the thing. Like even like a Pixar movie now, right? Like it's a cartoon what you're watching. It's like a modern day version of an animated film. But like some of the objects in the modern ones, right? Like you compare the original Toy Story to like Toy Story 4, let's say, and then you look at objects like just in the background, like wooden objects. Metallic objects, they just look so much better than the original Toy Story because their material rendering has gotten so much better, but it's still an animated film, if you know what I mean. Like, I don't think it's going to change anything like that. But maybe like games that are trying to aim for photorealism will hit that sort of like uncanny valley wall.
I figure any game is just going to be more detailed in whatever artistic fashion that they've decided to develop the game in. This is fantastic news. This is super exciting, but I also fear that we're going to get like that NVIDIA stamp on the next generation. Like it's only available for the 4000 series and 5000 series. Then everyone that's got a 3000 series GPU, like the blokes with like 3090s, they're just like, what do you mean? Why? Yeah. That wouldn't surprise me. I really hope that that isn't the case, and that any RTX card that has compatible amount of, well, it would be the tensor cores, right?
Yeah.
So,
but the thing is, the problem with DLSS frame generation is that they introduced like a high-end like accelerator just for that, like a custom hardware, like in addition to tensor cores, just for that. And like it's basically a type of AI engine that like wasn't available in the 20 and 30 series tensor cores.
Okay, so there is still some kind of limitations.
Frame generation tapped into that, and I think because they updated that architecture or the AI hardware in the 40 series, I think NVIDIA was like, well, what technology do we have in development that we can tailor specifically for that? I think like, you know, worst case scenario. I mean, yes, like NVIDIA was like, how do we make the 40 series something that people want to upgrade to? Well, and obviously the decision was, we're working on frame generation, AI-based frame generation. Let's tailor it specifically for this hardware now. Let's forget about trying to get it to work on all 20 and 30 series GPUs. Let's just get it working. I think that's guaranteed what they did. Now, whether they're going to do that for this, I hope not, because I think this is like a game changer for game developers as well. And like if they want game developers, like you're going to have to...
Something you can't like expect every game developer to upgrade.
Something like this has to be more open.
Yeah, and I agree with that.
And even to the point where it's like initially it's supported by every single RTX GPU with tensor cores from like, let's say there's a baseline, like it has to be at a 30 series and above for some reason, whatever the case is. Yeah. But then also they potentially open source it, and then AMD GPUs with AI hardware, there's a version that runs on that as well. Like it's just they work with Microsoft to get it into the DirectX API, or Epic to get it into the Unreal Engine, and then it's a cross-platform thing.
Then it just goes from there.
That's the ideal solution, because then it just makes games run look better, and then also as well, like if you got an NVIDIA GPU, you'll benefit from the fact that it's their technology and it's going to look better on their hardware. But then I think the allure of, if this makes games look better, and there's an option to enable it, like if it's a simple implementation, then NVIDIA could be like, well, this is going to allow us to say games look better on our hardware, and here's the proof. Check out this game with this technology running on our GPU, and here's the game without this, without that unticked running on our GPU, as well as competing every other GPU. And you're like, oh wow, that just looks so much better. So then, you know what I mean? That's a game changer for almost being able to sell a GPU to actually say, actually, if you get ours, it's going to look better.
Yeah. And, you know, that's a really easy thing to do. Yeah, I mean, it's super nice to be like, oh, you know, well, everyone that has an RTX card can use this.
But
or you can be like, oh, I'm going to make $50 billion if I just say the 50,000 series can do it. Yeah. It's like, you know what I mean? 50 billion is obviously an arbitrary number. But that makes it tech different is very exciting. We should keep our eyes on that. And any more news that comes out about it, because, you know, we love our graphics. That's for sure.
The next one is AMD's updated their fluid motion frames out of nowhere.
Okay.
So this is like AMD's frame generation that is like, it's weird, but like this one is promising because it runs at the driver level. So it works with every game basically. And Fluid Motion Frames version 2 updates add support for Vulkan-based and OpenGL. So if you know DirectX, that's just like a rendering API that's Microsoft's for Windows. But then back in the day, you had OpenGL, which is like runs on Linux, everything. OpenGL is even supported. It's OpenGL for a reason. It's open source. It's for every platform. And then you've got Vulkan, which is also open, but that's kind of way more advanced and modern. Vulkan is what id Software games use traditionally. they kind of like pioneered it with Doom 2016, or they made it more mainstream, and then Doom Eternal as well. That's like one of the reasons why they run so well. Like Vulkan ray tracing was one of the first engines to implement ray tracing, so that's why NVIDIA was able to do like Quake 2 RTX, because they ported it to Vulkan before it was formally introduced into DirectX. So anyway, so that's just to say that they're now the Fluid Motion Frames 2 runs on all these APIs, which means if you've got a Radeon GPU, you can turn on frame generation at the driver level on any PC game. Any PC game, like thousands. Like if it's not, you'd almost have to be like, here's the list of 10 games that it doesn't work on. Really,
yeah.
That's where it's gotten to the point. Like if it's, like name a game, it'll work, right? Basically, but they've launched version 2.0 that's also improves the image quality and reduces the latency up to about 28%. That was one of the issues with this, was that like the latency wasn't as good as FSR frame generation or DLSS, which has to be at part of the game. This is driver level. Like, NVIDIA has upscaling that's driver level. It's called NIS. You can turn it on for every game, but that's just image scaling, where it just like, it's almost like upscaling on a TV, where it just increases the resolution. Really, it doesn't increase. It's not DLSS. It doesn't try and make it look as good as a native rendering, and it just does what it can with what it has. So it's not as good. The image quality isn't as good as that, but they've improved it, and they've also added was it anti-lag 2, if it's available in the game, added that as well. So it's a update that just rolled out, so we have to see how it works or how it looks in comparison. And one of the other caveats is that because it works at the driver level, generating frames when there's fast motion on the screen is a problem still. So what happens with Fluid Motion Frames is that it disables itself when it detects that there's like if you're spinning the camera around and it's like, it's like blurry mess or whatever, like it's not even going to try and to attempt to generate frames based on all that. Because then games will just like have these like moments where it looks like a low quality YouTube video, if you know what I mean.
Right. Okay. So they lean into native. Well,
so then it just basically disables.
Like
so
just
then
the normal blur.
Yeah, then it'll go from like 150 down to like 60 FPS for like those fast moving bits, which is kind of weird. So, but
that'd be jarring. I would feel that.
You would feel that, and
yeah.
But the good thing is that they're creating a version of frame generation that works on. I mean, it is limited to Radeon GPUs because it's a Radeon driver, right? So. But it works on every single game. So it's good that they're updating it. And this could be it's something that differentiates AMD from NVIDIA, because they're basically saying, well, with Fluid Motion Frames, you can double the frame rate in any game if you've got a Radeon GPU.
Oh. Wow. Okay.
But obviously you're sacrificing image quality with that.
Yeah. See... This is the problem with, I think we've talked about this before. It's like when you're trying to fix everything at once, you can't really make it great.
Oh yeah, like
you know what I mean?
If you're doing the more broad you get,
but so the less impact it has.
But there is a point, right, where people are willing to say, well, I can take the hit, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like if you're playing a game on PS5 and you select your game in performance mode, because 60 FPS just feels so much better than 30. Like, even 60 FPS on PC now feels slow. Like, if we're being honest, we've just gotten to the point where now you want to, like, if it's a competitive game, you want 100 plus. Because
definitely.
Because you can feel it, especially with modern modes. But, like, the console thing is like, I'm going to run in performance mode. It means I'm going to be playing the game at a lower resolution with lower visual quality settings. But I'm willing to make that sacrifice. So with Fluid Motion Frames, there is a point where it becomes like, okay, I can see that there's a hit, because you can see a hit in visual quality when on PlayStation or Xbox, but you're choosing the higher frame rate because it's just so much smoother. If they get the latency right, there is a point where it's like the latency is good and it just looks so much smoother. Sure, it's occasionally, obviously I can tell it's not 100% what it was before, but because it's like 150 FPS, this is just so good, I'm going to play like this.
Yeah. Yeah, you're totally right. In a competitive scene, I'm always going to sacrifice quality for more frames. But if I'm playing a RPG, open world game, cinematic, single player story, etc., I can manage on. I mean, if I really need to, 30 FPS, and the game looks awesome.
I think like to me it's like 50s. Like I can like you need more than 30 though. Like there's a point like with VRR, like with G-Sync or whatever, like as soon as you hit that, I think it's like at the base level, the most basic VRR displays start at like 48 hertz, between 48 and whatever the max refresh rate is. As long as you hit that, that's why I think like 50 is a good baseline for gaming, because with G-Sync or FreeSync, it, you know, like once you hit that and you have that enabled, it's indistinguishable from like a locked 60, you know, like as long as you get in the 50s, which is why console modes are experimenting with 40 FPS modes for TVs with VRR, because they're 120 hertz OLEDs. They can, you know, 40 is like it's divisible by 3, so like if it hits 40, but then if it fluctuates, VRR can keep it looking like 40, and that's actually looks so much smoother than 30. It actually looks like, a lot of people be like, oh, that's performance mode in a way. Like, what's the difference? But the difference between 30 and 40 is a lot bigger than 40 to 60. And it's the same with like 50 to 60, if you know what I mean. Like 30 to 50 FPS is a massive difference, which is why I like that, versus like 50 to 60, it's like whatever. Like I think when you get to 60, like 60 to 80, interchangeable, I think.
Yeah.
And then from 80 to 100, I think is like another sweet spot. And then anything above 100, I could not tell the difference really.
Yes. I think the incremental, like the big moments in terms of upgrading, obviously going from console locked at 30 to 60 is night and day. But then going from 60 to 100, above 100, maybe above, I would say 60 to 144, that feels night and day.
Yeah,
like
if it's like
nosebleed,
a hard cut, you go a hard
nosebleed type of, I'm never going back to 60. Like as soon as you plug that monitor in for the first time and you change Windows over from 60 hertz to 144, you're like, what have I been doing all of this time?
I think we even mentioned it on here. You were like, oh, like something's wrong with my monitor. Like, what's going on? Yeah. And then I'm like, then you go in the display settings. Oh, it reverted back to 60 hertz.
Yeah, it's gross.
Like you actually notice it. Like it is like it. You know, people say
I can
like,
see it. I can see 60 hertz when I move my mouse.
Yeah, you can. It's like slow mo now. It's like, ooh, I can't. My eyes can't handle.
And then the next jump, I would say, from 144 is 240. That and just to
experience. Actually, I've got the 240, but I haven't like pushed it to that level. Like you've.
Oh, you need to play like Overwatch or something like that. It is like something that's fast-paced, competitive shooter. And also, yeah, Overwatch 2 is fantastic for the monitor that you have, which I'm pretty sure is the 321 UPF.
Yep.
Is it the UPF? Yeah.
Or the UR, whatever it is.
URF? Yeah, whatever it is. Yeah. 4K 240 hertz MSI OLED monitor for those that are interested.
And if you're interested,
go check out the review on Tweakdown.
If you're interested, definitely go get it, because it's like the next gen OLED panels are so good.
It is. They are fantastic. The third gen OLEDs are great. But the difference, I would say, between, say, 60, 144, that's 100% difference. That's night and day. Between 144 and 240, I would say that's like 50% different. No, maybe I would say even 25% different, really.
Yeah, it's like a slight.
Like it starts to, you're on the arse end of the bell curve now. Like, and I think
returns.
the next jump from 144, like if you want to hit that like a same effect from 60 to 144, is 144 to 360. 360 is it's like, you know, when, I don't know if you've seen Rick and Morty, but Rick makes a perfectly level surface for Morty, and he goes absolutely insane because he's standing on a perfectly flat, because nothing's actually ever perfectly flat. Yep. And he challenges Rick to make something that's perfectly flat, and he makes something that's perfectly flat, and Morty's standing on it, and he's like, He's losing his mind because his body's never actually. That's what 360 feels like.
And I think like the big difference that, like especially with like OLED panels and IPS panels, and that is that when you get to that sort of refresh rate, what happens? It's like it's the motion clarity that improves. We saw like demos of, remember NVIDIA was showing like some tech that was able to replicate 500 hertz motion clarity on their G-Sync Ultra or whatever. We remember, like, I think it was like Computex, not this year, but the previous year, they were showing that tech. And what it is that, like, when there's a fast-moving object, let's say you're playing a shoot or whatever, and like somebody's like running past, like really fast, and like the increased refresh rate from like 144 to 360, what that means is that like if you saw it side by side, like one of them is like blurry, right? It's like because it looks like a blur, that person or that character or whatever is going past the screen fast. But then on the 360 or even like up to like 500 now, whatever, they're breaking the records. It's like, oh, that's like super clear. Like you can tell, like it's like the outline or whatever it is, like there's full motion clarity for the moving object, moving at a high speed. So it's not just like blurry. And it's kind of like in movies as well, like, when there's fast cuts in camera movies, it's 24 FPS. So they become, there's motion blur like very, very quickly in a movie. That's why like camera pans are like measured because they're dealing with 24 frames per second.
Yeah.
As well as, and then like there's fast cuts in action movies. It's disorienting because there's no way that you can represent that in for it to be clear. But like if you turn your head quickly, like it doesn't feel jarring because your eyes can like you can focus. Objects aren't going to become just like an instant blurry mess. And when we're getting to these higher refresh rates, that's essentially what they're trying to resolve, which is just motion clarity. Because at 144 hertz, if you're playing, God of War or Horizon or Ghost of Tsushima, the latest PlayStation ports on PC at 100 plus FPS, you're playing these measured open world games, and everything's gonna look smooth, crisp, and like there's not going to be a lot of like blurriness or whatever because they're not games that are super fast motion really.
Yeah, that's why they're always limited to 60 FPS,
which is like sometimes fine, yeah. Yep.
Yeah, which is fine. Speaking of things that are not limiting but potentially debilitating, how do you feel about wearing a piece of AI hardware that mocks you occasionally?
Well, it depends on how it mocks me.
Only in the worst of times. only when you're down and looking for a friend. That was a bad joke. So what we're going to talk about right now is a new AI wearable. If you are, got your ear to the ground in the tech industry, you've probably heard about the Rabbit R1 and the Humane AI pin. Both of these devices were quickly considered flops. Essentially what they do is they're a little AI model that's running both locally and through the cloud on a tiny little device that you then pin onto your shirt, jacket, whatever, and you're meant to communicate with this device through audio. And it was pretty much a nuded smartphone that just had AI features in it. There was only two of them, and again, these companies receive millions of dollars in investments, etc., etc. MKBHD called one of them, I'm pretty sure it was the Rabbit R1. Or one of those devices, one of the worst products he's ever reviewed ever, which is very funny. And now we have heard about a new kid on the block, and it's called Friend, and it is my personal favorite. Because it will bully you when you are down. And who doesn't want a AI companion that you carry around everywhere to just not talk shit to you occasionally? So this product, again, called Friend, just Friend. It is not a pin that you put on your shirt. It is a medallion that you wear around your neck. Now, the video that I'm interested in seeing how many views it has, because when I reported on it, it was around 90,000. Yeah, 90,000. Is when I found the video. This was posted on the 30th. It is, again, the first today. It now has 168,000. And the like to dislike ratio, 1K liked to 5.3K downvoted, and just some of the comments here. That's my personal favorite. Reese put that up on the screen. If A24 made commercials is not a good way to pitch a product, because the trailer is kind of haunting in some ways. At the start, and we'll just do a little bit of a breakdown here of the trailer. So woman is yawning, not yawning.
We could actually play a little excerpt from it, so people can hear what the AI says.
Yes, yeah. Reese can sort that out. So she presses the button on her chest. So I'm just going to talk about the functionality with the device itself now. So she presses a button on the front of the device, which is around her neck, and then she speaks to it. So, okay, I'm not very good at wooing. And the device will reply to her via text. So you still have to have your smartphone with you. You still have to. It's not like, I'm going to buy this AI thing so I don't have to carry the smartphone anymore, because you know how people are trying to reduce screen time, etc., etc. No, you still got to have your phone with you. So, yeah, then the the friend replies to this woman and says, well, at least we're outside. And she's like, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, and then
at least we're outside.
Like a gaming guy, just gaming, and then being frustrated, and then the AI is like, you're getting thrashed.
Yeah. Let's move on to the next. That's my favorite. That's my completely. We'll save that for the end. Actually, we'll skip over that, because that's what made me report on this. I just couldn't believe it. So the next scene in the trailer. This is the promotional video, and this raised more questions for me than provided answers for what this product is capable of. So this woman is eating lunch. She is watching a video on her phone, presumably on break. Emily, the friend AI, well, I'm presuming that she's named this AI Emily, says this show is completely underrated, which this means the AI can see what is on
I think it's just
user's phone?
No, I think it's just... maybe because the app is running on your phone as well.
It's a Bluetooth connection. This is how it's connected to your smartphone. I didn't know Bluetooth was capable of...
Well, the Bluetooth would be just to transmit audio from the microphone, because it's just a necklace with a microphone, right?
Yeah. But the AI is unprompted, because there's nothing shown of this woman saying, Emily, this TV show XY that I'm watching, what do you think about it? And then the AI says, this show is completely underrated. It said that unprompted. It didn't have any prior information on the show, so it can see the screen.
Yeah. So when you install the app, it'll say, do you wish to grant access to your entire phone? Yes. It'll be one of those apps, you know? So then it knows what's happening on your phone. So it's basically like a phone companion. It's like a AI phone app where you wear a microphone around you.
It's your friend, Kosta.
That is
your friend.
So what's weird is that the ad for it is fun. I mean, it's almost like a parody, right? Because it's so slickly produced.
Yeah.
It looks like an SNL sketch or something like that, right? So, but what's weird is that it's a microphone, so it's encouraging you to just sit there talking to yourself all day.
Yeah, no, to an NPC.
Yeah, to your AI friend, but the AI friend is just sending you text messages on your phone, and it's just listening via a microphone.
I don't know if you picked up from watching the trailer, but the AI slightly right after, again, the woman that is watching the video on her phone presses the button. And then replies to the AI. I can't hear what she said. And then the AI just says, "How's the falafel?" How does it know that she was eating a falafel?
I I think part of
it has access to the camera.
I think there's part of this is the fact that it's an ad and they're just saying this is what it could potentially do maybe. Like, you know, I think the functionality, this will be one of those things like pre-order now for $99. Like how great is it going to be? At the end of the video, but also as well, the fact that they got friend.com somehow is how that website is still available like 30 years after the internet. I do not know. But
yeah, that's crazy.
They must have like bought it off whoever owned it, the URL.
This insinuates that the AI is capable of sight.
Yeah, well, it infers that, but there's no way that it is, right? Unless the camera's always on as well. But not like even then, like for this price, there's no way the mobile phone processing will be able to run this app like constantly without draining the battery so quickly.
Your battery would be shot to hell. I don't even think you can use your camera, at least on iPhone, when you're playing a full screen video.
No.
Can you do that on Android? Can you play full screen video and still have your camera activated?
I don't know. Like maybe,
I don't think you can. I'm pretty sure it disables it.
Well,
I'm not sure.
You can have like, well, I don't think it's going to be using the camera like constantly. That just seems like it's just.
It seems insane, right?
It's going to just drain the battery. So like,
it's almost insane as actually having a AI medallion around your neck called Friend.
I think this is like.
This is hilarious.
This is not what they're trying to sell it as. Like, I think it's going to be a very limited, cheap sort of thing. That's going to be like, meh. Like a gimmick. This is like so gimmicky. There's no way it's going to be like this friend that's texting you about.
You don't believe that this is real. That's how crazy this is. You're like, this can't be. What are they doing? Now let's talk about my favorite part of this, and this is what made me report on it. So there is a very nice gentleman who is sitting in. That's clearly a bloke's room. In the video, there's no girls that live there. That is a bloke's dorm. There's cups on the table. There's wrappers. There's food around. There's no color coordination in this room whatsoever. They're playing games. The bloke that's wearing the medallion is getting pumped by his two roommates here. And they're like, "Oh, you're getting smashed." What do they say?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're getting...
You serious? He's like complaining. He's like...
Oh, wait.
Take notes, baby. Oh, man, you guys suck, bro.
Yeah. And then, the unprompted...
Jackson, his friend Jackson sends him a message. Because you're going to be stopping him. See, like, this is silly. You're going to stop the game just to look at what Jackson says on the phone.
But, like, just imagine... And also, this doesn't make sense again because he didn't press the button. So it's always listening.
Yeah, I know. Well, I think you press the button if you're going to ask it a direct question, maybe. If you want to engage with it directly.
Oh, okay. So it's always listening.
But it's always listening and it's always going to be sending periodical, like, comments.
Yeah.
Like, imagine that.
So...
Like,
my man is sitting here, he's getting just destroyed in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, and then one of your friends is like, "Man, you're crap at this game," and he's like he's a little tilted. He's like, "No, yeah, no worries." Ding, phone goes off. You pick it up. And the first message you see is, "You're getting thrashed. It's embarrassing." Why would you want to own this product? It's just you pick it up at the worst time. You're like, oh, maybe mum messaged me. Maybe my girlfriend told me she loved me. You pick up your phone. Oh no, just more slander against your good name. But it's just from an AI medallion that you're wearing around your neck. Like, I can't. Why would you include this in the promotional video? Who watches this and goes, I want that?
But it's also like fake as well, because the video is like it's creating these scenarios based on what its capabilities are. So like the gaming scenario is like you're going to be in a room with your friends, like both playing a game online. Like that's not how it works, man. Like you got your headset on. If this was real, he would just have his headset on, chatting over a mic, just playing the game online. And the
couch co-op exists. I did it last weekend.
Yeah, but not like this insinuates they're playing like a first-person shooter. Oh yeah, I guess like if you're playing Smash Brothers or whatever, and then it's going to say you're getting thrashed. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, but it's just so funny that like he picks up his phone, you're getting, and there's just this sad look in the man's eye. Like I've paused it right. He's just like looks at it. He's like,
but they're selling this
I'm getting thrashed.
They're selling this as like the friend in your group of friends that's the one that always gives like the snarky, funny comments.
Oh, you think weird. This guy he's getting like
that's what like they're selling it as like the friend that's going to be like you're going out in that shirt, like like the one that's just going to be just like cracking.
Yeah, wise. But that only makes sense when you know that friend and you can see his like mannerisms, like just getting text
or even that like is text from that person, like that person, like it's funny.
Yeah.
This is like
you can always
DMs.
Hear them. When you're reading it, you can always hear them saying it through their voice. When it's Jackson, which is what this man has named his AI friend medallion, it's just straight up trash talk. You're getting thrashed. It's embarrassing. Anyway, I thought
that's funny. Like
this is hilarious.
I think I would try and get one.
I want one.
You. Like $99 doesn't seem too.
I mean, I review AI products now, so maybe I'll ask him and then write something up and talk about it on the show. It would be awesome to get one. In all seriousness though, and all jokes aside, I haven't seen a single AI wearable that can't be converted into software for a smartphone.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right.
All of these products will become software in smartphones.
They're basically like, but it's like a smartwatch, right? Like the smartwatch is just an extension of your smartphone. So that's what they're going to become like. So I get
but
it. Like,
even
a wearable is not essential. Like it's never going to be essential.
Yes. The only type of consumer that I can see adopting some kind of AI wearable that isn't a smartwatch or a smartphone is the consumer that is looking to reduce their screen time by buying have you heard of the Nothing phone?
Yeah.
Like it's a very cut down, rudimentary smartphone, and that's its intention. It is meant to be here's the absolute essentials for what makes a smartphone. No more bells and whistles. And, you're not someone like, obviously in today's day and age, you need to have a phone to operate in society without like a lot of friction. Of course you can get by without one, but like, it'll make your life a lot easier if you did have one. But if you're not into it and you want to cut down, maybe one of these pins is a way for you to not carry your phone but then again, you got to have your freaking phone on you anyway.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I'm trying to find like who is this for?
But also as well, like this medallion, right? Like it looks cultish, if you know what I mean. And like if you saw, like,
it does.
If you walked into a room and like 50 people were wearing this, you would think they were part of like some cult.
If I got one of these, I would want mine to be like an upside down pyramid from Yu-Gi-Oh! Yeah. And then when I press the button, it would be like Yu-Gi-Oh! All right, that's enough out of that. That is a very interesting product that I'll try and get my hands on and use on the show. But let's talk about Logitech working on a quote forever mouse.
Yep.
So this is an interview with The Verge. Logitech's CEO was touching on what the company is working on behind the scenes. Faber, CEO Haneke.
Yeah, Haneke.
Haneke Faber. I'm guessing did a tour of the R&D labs or was presented with what Logitech was working on behind the scenes, and he said that he was shown a quote forever mouse at Logitech's quote innovation center. It translates to R&D labs. So this forever mouse was directly compared to the longevity of a watch in the way that people, more often than not, choose not to throw away their old watch. Logitech is aiming to create a product that captures that same longevity. So he was asked follow-up questions about this because, you know, like, what, you're going to buy one mouse for the rest of your life? That seems kind of crazy. So, okay, what made this forever mouse a forever mouse? Faber described it as a little heavier. It has great software and services that you'd constantly update, and it was quote unquote beautiful. And he said that we're not necessarily super far away from that as well. So then there was a bit in the interview where he's dancing around, like, how do you monetize a forever mouse? What is the business model from Logitech's point of view on making money from selling you a once-off purchasable mouse? Like, you're never gonna, and that's how they're marketing it, like, that you're never gonna need another mouse again. How do they make money? So, digging deeper into the prospect of a mouse you would never need to replace, Faber was asked what the business model would be for such a product. Faber explained that the forever mouse would need to offer value in the form of a service, which would be hinged on future software updates. Now we're getting closer and closer to an actual answer here. Faber was further pressed for explanation as what this would entail for the end consumer, and then was directly asked, and this is a quote from the Verge interview, "I'm going to ask you this very directly. Can you envision a subscription mouse?" Faber responded, "Possibly." And then was asked, "And that would be the forever mouse?" Faber responded, "Yeah." So, What do you think about hardware that is, I mean, I'm guessing presumably from what he has said here, is going to have valuable software updates that are rolled out, I'm presuming periodically, almost like DLCs, that you would then buy over, I'm guessing, Logitech's soft, like, what is it, their G Suite or whatever it's called. And I don't know, each of these are, I'm guessing, anywhere between $5 and maybe $20 a pop. And then every year, new software comes out that makes your mouse better.
Yeah.
So all you pay per month
is for like the software and things like that. Like, where it gets, like, the idea is like cool. It's like, okay, what if you had a mouse that was like an expensive watch, right? Or like because they all use that terminology because, like, if you buy like a really good watch, it could last you generations because it's like they're mechanical, they're analog in a way, right? But you're talking about technology that is all just, it's so dependent on just silicon and, like, you know, like their sensors, their USB interface. Like, what happens when we're up to USB 6 like 30 years from now? Like, is this forever mouse going to work? I mean, they're going to be backwards, like, you know, is it going to still be relevant?
What about the actuators inside of the mouse itself?
Like my other
degrade over time, right? Like, you've only got so many clicks.
Yeah, but they're all like this is the other thing, right? Like, all these, like, they're high-end equipment, right? Like, you know, switches in a keyboard are rated at 20 million presses. You got like 10 million clicks on like the buttons or the left and right click buttons on a mouse. And if you work that out, that's going to last you like decades, right? So aren't these already forever mice if that's how you're selling them? You're selling them as devices that can be clicked 50 million times.
Yeah.
So if that's the case, then, you know, the keycaps or like the buttons are made from this material that has a lifespan of another 20 years, whatever. Like, you know, like, you're already creating quote unquote like peripherals that supposedly would last decades. So I think this is like a gimmicky aspect to it where obviously, like, him saying heavier means they're gonna, like, it's basically gonna be designed so the mouse itself won't degrade in how it looks or feels, like, as quickly as other mice, and that's what makes it a forever mouse. But the actual technology will be based on when they launch it, right? They launch it today, it's going to have their best sensor, USB-C, blah, blah, blah. But that's not going to change, like, unless they design it for, like, to be modular where they can replace the sensor or they can replace this as well.
And who the hell is going to want to do that?
And your subscription includes, like, but then how do you even plan for that? They don't even know what technology is going to come out and it's going to fit or whatever. Like, Yeah, I don't know. Like I think it's a marketing term to call it the Forever Mouse. But like if you launch it, I think it's going to be interesting because I would want to review it because it'd be like, okay, how is this going to feel compared to a normal mouse? And how different is it really? But at the end of the day, like I just think it's just a name for a premium mouse.
Yeah,
that will
fair
last
enough.
you years. Like, yeah, of course, it's going to be made of like high quality components, but that's all you're basically putting a name on. Like like keyboards, like a high quality keyboard will last you as long as it's compatible with hardware. Could last you ages if it's like the new Asus $500 keyboard, right? Like the switches and hot swappable thing. Like if you maintain it, like you don't need to buy another keyboard.
Yeah.
But then at some point, like, will the interface or will the software be outdated or will the firmware like stop being updated? And then at some point, it's going to be end of life because it's a piece of computing hardware. Like you're not going to, like it doesn't matter how good a keyboard from the 1970s is. It's just you can't plug it into a modern PC. Like there is a point where technology is just like a watch is a mechanical fine piece of analog equipment that's just not going to change. That's why it'll last generations because there's no need. You don't have to subscribe to firmware updates for it.
Yeah, that's true. There is just obsolescence with tech on a long enough timeline.
Yeah, it's just unavoidable.
Yeah. I think that is about it for this week, right?
We'll do just Activision's secret experiment to close it.
Oh, that's right. Yes, we forgot the secret experiment. We'll wrap up on
story.
that. Let's wrap up on that.
So Call of Duty players love complaining. And there's obviously like they crack down on cheaters and stuff like that and et cetera, et cetera. But everybody keeps coming back because it's fun to play.
There's no one that hates Call of Duty more than Call of Duty fans.
Which is weird, but it's kind of like everything, right? As soon as you get to popularity reaches a certain level, like it's like Star Wars. There's nobody that hates Star Wars more than Star Wars fans because it's popular.
Exactly right.
There's nobody that hates Marvel or DC more than those fans because they've got the vocal minorities that are just so vocal that it's insane. And it's the same with like Call of Duty. Like I'm indifferent about Call of Duty. I'm not defending it. I'm just like, it's like I could take it or leave it. I'll jump in every now and then, but I'm not obsessed with it or like even consider it like amazing. But I do know that the multiplayer is great and a lot of fun if you jump into it. And one of the reasons why is because it uses a quote-unquote controversial skill-based matchmaking system. And they released a paper that goes into detail for how much detail they go into it. This is $1 billion franchise, right? Every Call of Duty game makes $1 billion on the first day that it releases or the first weekend. It's like a blockbuster film. So basically, the way it's designed is that you jump into a Call of Duty multiplayer match as long as it knows your profile, you've played enough. Like you initially, if you're brand new, it'll put you into like into matches with like players that don't have they haven't played as much as well. So what they've created is like a system, skill-based matchmaking or SBMM that is designed to ensure that whenever you play, it's always contested. It's always either close or competitive, but also as well that you'll perform well as well. So like it's a very complex system that matchmakes you to make sure, like it uses all these stats. It's not just kill death ratio, it's all these other factors as well. Team-based stuff, what you do in a match, how you move, but it's very, very complex. But it's designed as well to make you feel better as well, like so that you'll perform okay. Like at a very bare minimum, you'll perform okay. Like you're not going to get absolutely decimated and just be like, why am I even playing this game? This is terrible. And so a lot of times people are saying, well, that makes it stagnant, right? Like it's always going to be competitive. Every time you play Call of Duty, it's always going to be people at your skill level, or it's always going to be very, very similar. So that makes it a similar experience. So then Activision, obviously, like, there's so much invested in Call of Duty. They ran an experiment at the beginning of this year in America. 50% of all their Call of Duty players for a month, right? We're talking about like quite a few players. What they did is they didn't remove the skill-based matchmaking completely, but they scaled their complex matchmaking system back to a very, very basic level to make it more like, I guess, like other multiplayer games or like other multiplayer games that don't invest this much money into matchmaking.
Yeah.
And what they found is that Actually, people outside of the top 10% of players, which are always going to be the hardcore that are always do well because they're just, their skill level is just so good that they're going to play Call of Duty. They're going to just do well, right? So outside of that, the returning player rate metric dropped by 90%. So people weren't playing as much. They were actually stopped playing. And they said if they ran it for a few more months, they basically said that the outcome would have been the entire Call of Duty population would have just steadily dropped month after month.
Wow.
So what makes this interesting to me is that it's like, well, like, you know, when you see like games, they come out, there's heaps of players and everybody's having fun. And then like the player count drops off, and then it feels like, you know, like if you jump into like X game now, it's like, well, you're just going to get stomped because you're always going to be against the hardcore players that are still there. Whereas Call of Duty like maintains like a level, and then the annual releases and stuff like that. Like it's fascinating because it shows that whatever formula that they've come up with, and it might be specific to Call of Duty, is that they've nailed it, right? This is designed
it's like
to
the
keep
TikTok
players,
algorithm.
It's like it's designed to keep players coming back, and they're coming back based on how their matchmaking works, and almost solely because like this, it's a very detailed like 29-page report that goes into so much detail that basically says if they were to remove this skill-based matchmaking system, this complex system that they have, Call of Duty would just gradually decline in popularity, and then in years it'll just be like a nothing anymore. Like it won't be the most popular game.
Wow.
Very, very quickly.
Well, I suppose this speaks to why the game is so consistently popular.
Yes.
Like without this kind of technology that's operating behind the scenes, it's shocking to me that people are still playing this game.
But this kind of explains it, right?
Hey,
like this explains like if you're a casual gamer and you buy it every year, and you always like if you jump online with Call of Duty and you have like a fun time, because it's kind of like they describe, like, you know, it's corporate speak. It's like player first. This is a player first system because what actually ends up happening is that you enjoy playing the game more, and isn't that the goal, right? But it's like, you know, in a competitive game, like it's like, well, that's not necessarily the goal. Isn't just for everybody to have fun. It's like, you know, it's competition. It's like there's a hierarchy. There's like ranked matches, blah blah blah. There's leagues, etc. etc. It's a very different thing. But no, like Call of Duty is like they've designed a system to, quote unquote, to make it fun for you to play. But the byproduct of that is that you've got the most popular game in the world, and it generates billions of dollars. So it's like, yes, that's the business model. The business model is to get players coming back, and you get players coming back by providing a consistent multiplayer, fun,
difficult,
experience.
Competitive, enjoyable experience.
Yes.
Like I think there was a study that I read, and this was a couple of years ago when I was doing a lot of research into behavioral psychology. I think, let's say, if you're playing with your little brother, or you are the little brother, or whatever, if you don't win 3.5 out of the 10 game attempts that you play against your older brother, you are just going to give up and move on. So you need to win at least approximately 20% of the attempts that you have against something for before you. If you win any less than that, then you'll be like, okay, this is futile. There's no reason for me to play this. It's clearly too hard. But you need to also, if you're winning 80% of the time, you're like, this is way too easy.
Yeah, so there's an inverse. Yep.
Yeah, the inverse. So there needs that's where a competitive, or like the essence of play is best enjoyed. It is right in that middle section where it's like, oh yeah, it's hard, but it's not impossible.
Yeah.
But and then it's also like, oh well, I'm not just wiping everyone, or like this could be like any type of game really.
Yeah, this is not like also like uncommon,
so
right?
This is representative of that.
Yeah, skill-based matchmaking has existed for ages, right? And like the very basic level, like when Overwatch came out, like I got heavily into
ELO.
the first few seasons of it, like, you know, when they started launching the competitive seasons, the ranked matches, you were put into like the different divisions, and I was put into like the lower end divisions. I'm like, I'm not a great first person shooter gamer. I just found that Overwatch a lot of fun because of the team based aspect of it. That's why I like Team Fortress and the more co-op-y, you know, if I play Apex, I'm going to play in groups. Like I prefer that versus just trying to be the solo fragger like in Quake or whatever. And I actually lost where I was.
Skill-based matchmaking.
Yeah. So like it exists in Battlefield, exists in those, and those like simple systems where like you play like a few rounds, like competitive play, and then you get put into like you know, like
placement matches.
Yeah, like placement matches. You're in like the bronze league, so you just play against those players. That's skill-based matchmaking. But even like just if you go like quick play, like it, like there are very basic systems like, you know, that exist, or even algorithms that you could probably even just inject into your game that automatically just takes these stats and then puts groups players together, and then it tries to group those first and then the second. But what this is basically showing like, well, if you interested, definitely check out Activision's paper because they go into detail on how it works. It's almost like a blueprint for like if you want your multiplayer game to last longer than the first month of, you know, hype or whatever. Like everybody, Twitch streamer is playing this game now, and you want it to last longer than that. Like this is what you need to do to keep players coming back, because it's designed around like exactly what you said with like the psychological aspect. It's like there's probably an element of it's like that is like to make sure that you get X amount of kills or whatever it is, or like you're 100%. On the ladder, or like every round you're going to be like, you're not going to be at the bottom every single time. Like that just that would just force you to leave. And that's probably what happened. Like when they lessened the skill matchmaking, there's just so many players that it just like the only way to make it fun for everyone is to just drill down and implement some complex system that they've got.
Yeah, that is 100% how to do it. People get bored or they just lose too many times, and then both of those scenarios end up in people not playing your game. And that goes for any game. This is for, and I'm talking like physical games as well, not just video games. Like if you suddenly start a sport and then go play like A grade of whatever like, that is, like and you just get domed like every single time that you try and compete, you're going to be like, I'm going to give up. This sucks. But then you need a glimmer of hope. Humans need like to see that it's possible. With that being said, we should wrap this episode up. Pardon me. Yep. As always, head down to the description below. There's a Google Docs link, and within that are all of the stories that we've talked about today, and a few more that we didn't get to, that were, you know, still on the plate but didn't make the cut. There is further reading on everything that we've talked about here today. And if you are listening on the Spotify, just audio version, go head over to the YouTube. There's graphics. There is a bunch of stuff from that you can get visual indicators for what we're talking about in each of the episodes. And if you're on YouTube, thank you very much. And go check out the audio versions for when you're on the go. Do you have anything to wrap up with?
No. Stay tuned for more next week. Next week, we'll start to see the first reviews for AMD Ryzen CPUs, and the week after that. So we'll cover those in a general sense, and like whatever else gets announced that's AI related that you can wear.
That's it. Yeah. Thank you very much for listening, guys, and we'll be back next week. Thank you. See ya.